All right. There's dogs barking in the hallway. It is, what's up? It is December 27th, Christmas. Oh, I should mention, because I could be here saying I have indisputable evidence that there are aliens from other planets that I'm going to reveal, and someone would still be like, "What's up with what's that guy wearing?" This is an oversized baggy sweatshirt that is incredibly comfy, and it has two tigers on it. That's what that guy's wearing, and he got it for Christmas. But we're gonna hang out and chat about UFC 219. That is what up, guys? That is Saturday night. Might watch it with my buddy West Coast Dave. Um, Earlier on the YouTube channel, we looked at some Cyborg versus Holly Holm stuff. There's some interesting parallels with this fight, Khabib Nurmagomedov, and Edson Barboza. Interesting parallels, interesting connections to between both fights. And this is a really, really cool fight. People will be stoked about this fight. Cheers. This coffee has the flavor of chocolate and peanut butter in it. Yes, this fight has me pumped. It says down in the corner. Yeah, really exciting fight. Um, a quick thing to mention to you, I've done many breakdowns of Khabib Nurmagomedov in the past, particularly when I was working over at Fight Network. You can just look on YouTube and you can find those. Roger, I can't quite read your name. You want to hear about aliens. Sorry, bro. Don't know nothing about aliens. They probably exist, but that's the best I can do. But yes, you can look back and see some Khabib breakdowns I've done before. I really enjoyed them. I really enjoyed this guy's work. There was one I did, and I think it was when he was going to be fighting Tony Ferguson, and there was more people were interested in the fact that Khabib blocked me on Twitter. A quick recap: while discussing it, I drew the comparison between fighting a specialist like Khabib, somebody who's devastating one area, and to make that comparison easy to understand for not you guys, but for people who kind of just pop in and out of watching combat, I made a comparison to if you had to fight Ronda Rousey. In no way compared the two athletes, but compared how strategies are built. Khabib probably didn't see it. I don't know if he knows who I am, but his manager, who is a friend of mine, did, and somebody misdirected him and said, "Oh, dude, he compared him to Ronda," and he blocked me, which resulted in like 400,000 people watching it and millions in Russia. All of them going, "Wow, Robin Black sure likes Khabib Nurmagomedov. I wonder why he blocked him," but that's the why. But that is a comparison that is worth exploring. Not between the two athletes, but between how you build a strategy for somebody. So very quickly, well, let's look back at Ronda Rousey when she was beating everybody. Yeah, she started knocking people out later, had good knees to the body and stuff, but essentially she would go and armbar everybody. Now the fact that Khabib beats you up from different ride positions and different trapping of your body positions, he has a destination that he likes to get to. Ronda did too. She used to armbar everybody. Working backwards from that, so when people at the time who didn't have that great of an understanding or a global understanding of martial arts wasn't where it is today, people would say, "Oh, you're fighting Ronda, you better work on armbar defense." If you're working on armbar defense, you're dead. You're not going to take somebody who spent 20 years since they were 3 years old, 20 plus years, working on finding every variation of getting to the armbar, and then find a way to defend it. It's just not going to be done. That's not the answer. It's the knee-jerk reaction. Same thing with Khabib. It's like you better be able to get up from underneath, or you better be able to escape this wrist ride, or when he traps you in a crucifix. He has many different ways. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But he has a destination. So it's under here, actually, under my stack here. But I got a really great game for Christmas called Suro, and it examines how you build paths and how you follow paths and how paths themselves meander, and you have to understand where they're going, and you can use paths, you can be on the wrong paths. Ronda had a path. Khabib has a path. Josh Barnett has a path. Stephen Thompson has a path. Holly Holm has a path that she wants to be on in this fight against Chris Cyborg. So there's a path that you try to build. And if you work backwards from your path, you're Khabib, you want to be on top of somebody, in what his real goal, we'll talk lots about Edson Barboza and what he brings to the table and what his path is and so forth in a bit. But working backwards from this idea, Khabib has a destination in mind, and that destination is any variety in which he can pin and control you using a number of his body positions where one or more weapons can be free. Okay, that's his goal. That's his destination. It's not a specific destination like the armbar. But even Ronda's wasn't a specific destination. It may involve the arm, but there's 6 different arm bars, or 8, or variations, or the arm bar leads to different things, right? So it's not necessarily one destination, but it's a path with something in mind. And so Khabib's destination is some of a variety of destinations that result in the same thing. He will dominate you positionally in a way that he has one or more weapons free to hurt you. And you have very few defensive systems free to stop it. So if you can pin me in a way that my shoulders are flat, my arms are out of the picture, and my hips are flat, but you have a weapon free, intuitively you can tell that that's a incredibly dominant thing to be, right? And so when you think of Khabib's, one of my breakdowns was about the wrist ride and the history of the wrist ride, where Khabib will position himself in a way that he will pin my hips, he will trap one of my arms, and the other arm either holds me up or just blocks me and I collapse. So everything is bad for me. He has many, many, many others where he will try to pin one of your arms, and in stealing your arm, he'll take your back. So he's looking to position you. Dublin, in the house. I'm hoping to get to Dublin to do my show there, my one-man show sometime in the spring or summer. But yeah, his goal is to use 3 of his tools, plus whatever else he has, hips, shoulders, elbows, whatever, to positionally trap you in a way that he still has a weapon free. If he does that, he beats the shit out of you, right? Very simple. So that's his variable destination. And then you reverse engineer it. You work back from that. To get there, he must some way be getting control while being on top of you. To do that, he has to probably put you on the ground. To do that, he has to get a hold of you. To do that, he has to close distance. And you work your way out, all the way out, that's what you have, where you have to stop him. And again, we'll use Ronda as the simple example. Again, very different athletes, very different in every way. But she's a simple example because in the old days, when you look at Ronda beating somebody of top level at the time, like say Sarah Kaufman, the goal would be she'd have to first close the distance, then beat off the grips to maintain an advantageous grip position. Then she'd have to fight to get a spot where she can control you. Then she'd have to get her hips lower than you to get the leverage to throw you. When she threw you, then et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you are just ready to defend an armbar, you're screwed. You have to win one of those battles on the way out, so she has to reset and do them again. Right? So it's same thing with Khabib. How are you going to handle it on the ground? Well, by the time you're on the ground, you're in a lot of trouble. The handling it is in the steps backwards. So again, we'll move this conceptual discussion to something that seems to make some people angry. But when you get angry, that seems to be something very powerful for people in business. They want you to get angry. So I'm going to mention Mayweather fighting MMA. People are like, well, he doesn't know how to fight on the ground. Well, it wouldn't matter if he has to fight on the ground if you can't get a hold of him. So the game would be teach him to not be grabbed, not be held, not be touched. A game he already knows, right? So that will be the game that if you're fighting Khabib, you don't want to just admit he will destroy you if he has a top position on the ground, but your way to beat that starts much earlier than being on the ground with him. So somebody I saw mentioned footwork. Of course, footwork. What is footwork? Well, at its base, it's how we move our feet to position ourselves in space in fighting in relationship to where they are and to put us in positions where they can't do the thing they want to do, right? To which the answer, as we know it, people will say, well, he has to cut off the cage. Well, what does that actually mean? That actually means if my Joe Rogan coffee mug is Edson Barboza and he's trying to move this way, you have to somehow use straight lines to intercept him as he moves, right? So that's the first battle. That is always the first battle. That's the first battle. That's the battle that was left till recent times to even be fought. It's where guys like Stephen Thompson, even geniuses like Rory McDonald, couldn't get to him. Yeah, I know, you need one of these mugs, right? I think JoeRogan.net, you can find one of these mugs. Rory McDonald's a brilliant fighter. Why couldn't he get to Stephen Thompson? Because Stephen Thompson, that's funny. I know you can't all see the comments that come here, but I see them. I can't read them all because they take me on tangents, which tangents is what I do, right? But so Stephen Thompson is able to stay away from Rory McDonald. That was a new battle, a new mastery of battle. And Holly Holm did it with Ronda, and that's what you have to try to do with Khabib Nurmagomedov, right? So when we look at the root, what's happening in fighting, what's actually happening in there, and the thing that we see and talk about, they're almost unrelated. It's like Westworld. I don't know if you've seen Westworld, but the people living in Westworld, their world is very different than the people who come in and see it. And the people fighting and training and developing these things and studying it at the high level, their world is very different from the world being discussed on Twitter or being discussed on the Fox desk or being discussed on websites. Those conversations are old conversations that are not all that connected to reality. So when we go and we discuss things the old way, brand new things happening in high levels in advanced ways. When we discuss it the old way, we'll say, well, you know, if Edson Barboza can get those leg kicks going, you know, and slow down Khabib Nurmagomedov, that'll be great. But if Khabib can close the distance and get that body lock and get him to the ground, he'll dominate him. Those things are true, right? But they're just the top layer, the very, very top layer of what's going on. Of course, if you can kick Khabib in the leg a lot of times and slow him down, you'll win the fight. The question is, how do you do that? How do you do that in ways that you can hurt him and slow him down, make him less able to move? The less able to move he is, and the more able to move you are, that advantage grows and grows and grows and grows. So that is, of course, the strategy. But how and when do we do it? That's the trick, you know? And think about this often. When we're discussing these fights with our friends or on Twitter, or, you know, you see people talk about them on the internet. If you have the ability to come up with the idea, oh, this guy's got to use his footwork to stay away from him, but he's got to do this. Of course, the fighters and the coaches are 6 or 8 layers past that. And that's where the gold is. And that's where our learning, and that's where our study has to happen. You know, then we get into the specifics of it. Philosophically, if you're Edson Barboza, and again, this goes to Holly Holm, what amount of running, which is just staying away, do we do? And what amount of finding the moments to, while we make you overly aggressive here, we go over here, and while you have to reset, that's when we strike you. And that becomes the game. That becomes the entire game. Is how are we able to be in a position to hit you when you're not in a position or in balance to get a real hold of us and take us down? And that's the battle. And that's where most of the important battles are being, the primary battle, the first battlefield, that's where it's being fought in all of these fights. That's where it would be fought if Floyd Mayweather attempted to fight a half-decent UFC guy. Probably wouldn't do all that well. Probably wouldn't really understand the dangers that he's in, but if he dedicated time, I don't think he'll actually do it, although it's not impossible. I didn't think Conor McGregor would fight him either, and he made $80 million, making us all look crazy. Holly Holm, of course, it's the same game. Now, and think about this. This is what's interesting about this for me. Holly Holm has 25 minutes to do that, and Edson Barboza only has 15. That also means, and notice the comparison. Holly wants to touch and move, touch and move, touch and move, kick and move, punch and move, and make Cyborg chase her. Cyborg, all she wants to accomplish is landing shots. Her job is theoretically easier than Khabib's job of not only landing, but getting a hold. That's an extra step, right? These Khabib fights are fascinating to watch because it's like he wills himself to do it, right? But he has a path, and that path, he knows where he wants to end up. That's on top of you pinning you with one weapon free. To do that, he's got to be in some type of positional control or movement on the ground. If he gets there, he has ways of getting here. To get there, he needs to get a hold of you and take you to some type of all the way down or partly down. To get there, he's got to grab you. And to get there, he's got to close distance. The great thing about fighting with a path in mind is you know your goal. You're Khabib. Step one, get a hold of him. Close the distance and get a hold of him. I didn't accomplish step one. I go back and I try it again. Land strikes, protect myself. There are other assignments while I try to accomplish step one. But step one, close the distance, get a hold of him. And Edson knows your path. So Edson's step one is, don't let him close the distance. Don't let him get a hold of me. If he does, Edson's new goal is break his hold on me and regain distance. Do you see what I'm saying? It's just, they have two paths. They're each the star of their own movie, and it can't work out for both of them. The movie can't ultimately, only one of them will end up the star of the movie. And to do that, they have to make the other guy fail in his movie. You have a goal in mind, you know where you're going, you know what you have to do, and that's life. That's life, right? So ultimately, so then we take some of the other aspects that we often talk about in fighting. You're looking at two guys. My goal is to close the distance. Your goal is to not let me close the distance. That's step one between Edson and Khabib. To accomplish step one, there are now little sub-steps, little sub-details. So for Khabib, punches and kicks, land punches and kicks, particularly if Edson is so concerned with just escaping my grab and he starts to over-focus on that, I will hit him many times, very hard. I'll put myself in positions where he's so concerned about stopping my takedown, I'm actually using that to hit him. So these are very simple. You work your way out backwards. The guy who did this in the highest level, one of my favorite fighters in the world, Josh Barnett. If you look back at Josh Barnett's old fights, you see this path. Land punches until you get the body lock, get a trip. Work in positions, get to side, do some damage, get to mount. And you saw, and I did a breakdown of him as well back in the day, you can look it up, you saw his path. When certain guys he fought, actually the mount didn't end up working well. In the next fights, he would have moved to the mount, he would stay inside, or he'd work for half guard, and the new path would be drawn. And I always say that fighting is just a metaphor for life, and it is. You had the goal in mind of getting the body lock, taking him down, passing to half, passing to side, getting them out, and beating him up. And in doing so on that path, you found out that getting them out actually wasn't working as well as you used to. So you redesign your path to see how half guard works. And when he did that, he designed half guard in such a way that he found that setting up the head and arm choke worked really well. So he started doing that for a while. And he just builds a path. And once you have a path and you're really good at the path, in theory, and I think this is we're in a position where fighters will be winning. Like Khabib is a perfect example. Nobody's ever beat him. He works with a path in mind. And the path, the reason that's so good is the idea of being good at everything. And there have been guys recently, that I've interviewed over in Detroit and in Winnipeg. They're like, I just want to master everything. And that's admirable. It's beautiful. It's inspiring. But mastering your path and then mastering all of the little variations on your path that get you. So you're mastering your path, you get off the path, you master getting back on the path. It simplifies where you're going, and it makes you amazing at what you do. And then you get good at the ways to push it back, shoehorn it back to what you do. Eddie Bravo's whole system worked that way. When you look at what Eddie has built, Eddie had an amazing, he could work really well from this omoplata to this dew claw. And then he worked out, how do you get to that? Oh, he does this? Well, then I'll do that. And he built a design out of that. Then he was really good at the twister. So he built twister side control, which all built to the twister. As a result, he developed many other paths, but it was developed in search of getting to where he's going. But all of this, the beauty of watching fights is you can see life in all this stuff. You can see life in it. You get to a fork in the path, go to the way that you know really well. But if it's impossible there, then you have to innovate and improvise. And if you lose and fail, you have to go back and figure, oh, there's a new path. I didn't know how to get through that way. Now I have to learn it. Somebody said, who do you think is going to win? I have no idea. I have no idea. None. No idea. Neither do you. The discussing who you think is going to win and making a pick is a very The last 10 years, we've done that in television. And it carries over. We did it in sports, then it carries over to politics. And then we pick one and then we defend it. And then we find the ways to defend it. And if we're wrong, the other guys tease you, and then if you're right, you tease them. And it makes this insular, weird world that we're living in where there's only two ways. If Barboza wins, who should he fight next? I don't know. I don't think about that often enough either. I should. I know it's something people find interesting, you know, the next goal. But the one in front of you is so big and challenging that most of these guys don't think about that either. When they go to the press day, people say, you know, hey man, if you beat this guy, who do you want next? They'll have an answer planned. I'll talk to them and they say, oh, don't worry, I know who. When Rose beat Joanna, I shed a tear. Yeah, there's beauty in this kind of thing. She was terrified. And then she used that to be able to go in and have a brilliant, life-changing night. That is brilliant. I saw her in the days before. She was crying. She was, you know, it's overwhelming. And she did it, right? That's incredible. And all of these things are there always. But somebody said, who do you think is going to win? I don't know. Nobody knows. Going down that path, making a pick, I believe, and I will be fighting this discussion for a long time. Sometimes on television they ask me, and I'll do it if that's what my boss really wants. I'm not opposed to it, but it's a function of TV. It's like a mechanism to create discussion and debate, which gets people to watch your channel. And as a result, it shapes thought. Now our thought is shaped that you have to choose something it's just a talking point. Great observation, my friend. You must choose something, and then you have to defend it. What that does is create debate for TV or the internet or whatever, and then with that, that gets people engaged and makes the audience pick sides, and then you have a little battle. But that's at the root of some of the conflict we have in culture and society. And I know this is the things I like to talk about in my long, meandering discussions. They're very different than what producers would tell me to do. And that's why I do them. That's why I do them. Because everybody does it that way. And if everybody's doing something, it's probably the wrong way, because they've been doing it so long. So I will continue to tell people, don't make a pick. Don't say, you can cheer for your favorite. Everybody does. I do all the time. I'm a human. I love fighting. And I cheer for my friends and the fighters but when just trying to go in and look to find answers, you just keep following your curiosity. And your curiosity closes down and shutters in when you force yourself to pick something. Or, yeah, Khabib looks drained, somebody says. He has at times. Somebody asked, did you pick McGregor to beat Mayweather? I cheered for my friend. What I actually did was 11 hours of analysis. And in those 11 hours, I must have said 100 times it's highly unlikely that he would win. But then on the day of, you say, oh yeah, he's going to do it. You know, that's being a fan. I don't make picks. I don't believe in it. I don't know the answer. It's also, I find it to be very empowering to admit you don't know. We don't do it a great deal. But I have no idea. Can Khabib get on top of Edson Barboza, control him and beat him up? Yeah, I did. 11 hours. I did 11 hours. If you go on YouTube, it was just over and over again, different examinations of different angles and possibilities. History and how things take shape. That's what I do. That's what I do. It's what I'll continue to do. Continue to do it this odd, meandering way. And I enjoy it. I have a job. I get paid to do little tidbits of things and do it the way they're supposed to. This is where I get to hang out with you guys and try to search for answers in different ways and think out loud. And I value it a great deal. I appreciate it a great deal. So, final recap. Khabib versus Edson Barboza. Of course Khabib wants to try to get on top of him. Of course Edson wants to kick his legs. But the real battle happens in the maintaining of space. Then the big issue too is you lose that battle. You're Edson, you lose that battle, you have to win the next battle. Khabib has a hold of you now. And he's going to attempt to either take your back and lace your leg, or he's going to try to take you to the ground and move to your hip. You have to win that battle too. That's still a winnable battle. If that one, he gets you on that one because he's following his path of mastery, and you're on 4 points and he's on your hip, You have to win that battle too. And the further you go down, remember I said when you're fighting Ronda Rousey, you've got to learn to defend the armbar. You know what they really call that in the gym? They call those worst case scenario drills. They call them worst case scenario drills because it's the worst case scenario. We want to never have Ronda armbarring us. We want to never have Josh Barnett mounted us. We want to never have Khabib controlling one or more of our limbs while he has one free to smash our face in. Those are worst case scenario drills. We still drill them, but we drill them because in that moment we're looking for one final answer, and that answer is to get back to your feet or at least improve your position. The really interesting one for me that I'd like to see is Tony Ferguson and Khabib. For many reasons. We'll talk about that another day, but for many reasons, the biggest one being, and maybe Edson can look to this as well. Do you attempt, instead of trying to get back up, every time you try to get up against Khabib, he improves his position and he has an answer? Maybe you fight back to guard. Nobody does that with him. Once you're in guard, you treat it like the offensive position it is, with vicious elbows coming in on angles, and you cut him up and make him consider standing back up. And if you won't, you keep cutting him. Maintain your guard and cut him. Can you do that? Maybe not. Maybe all you have to do to beat that is be able to win the battle of controlling my biceps or shoulders if you're Khabib. I'm on the bottom. I want to elbow you. You control my biceps or my shoulders. In the old days, they used to control posture up, control the ribs and posture up. Now they'll bury the head in the sternum and control the biceps. Very different approach. If you win that battle, although if you're Khabib, you don't want to be stood up. So there's millions of little battles happening in there, all of which are fascinating. The more that you look at them, the less you know who can win which one, because as the better these guys get, the more they move from one to the other to the other. Fatigue can be a factor, but Khabib doesn't seem to get fatigued. And it's only 3 rounds, and these guys are brilliant. Why would you spend time in the worst case scenarios? It's a good question, because they might happen. And if you don't have at least prepared the attempt at an answer, then you just lose. Then it's over. You've lost. You have to at least spend some time there. Well, I hope that it's fun hanging out with you guys. I really appreciate it massively. I really do. I appreciate you letting me do it my way and meander where I want to go and think out loud. Ultimately, I know I leave you with way more questions than answers, but that's my goal. I hope it's okay. But that's my goal. I know the job is, as told by the boss, is give them answers. Pick a side and give them answers. And that's how it's been done, but I don't want to do it like that. I hope that's all right. Anyways, I appreciate you guys a lot. To recap, I have no pick, and the battle starts on the feet. It's very, very wide. The battle of closing distance. Khabib has a path. He has one that's almost unstoppable, but there are little pieces along the way where you have to try to stop him and move backwards down the path and stop him from moving forward. Easier said than done. But Edson Barboza is the type of guy who can do it. I know I talked way more about Khabib than Edson. I apologize to Edson and his team for that. But when you are looking at someone with a path, this is what Edson's team has done as well. They've examined it, tried to find ways, if possible, to beat it or at least identify where the battles are and try to win them. And the type of guy who can win those is a guy like this. Some specialized weapons. If he can find ways to be in balance and smash the legs like we talked about earlier, of course that's valuable. Make it harder. Make step 1 harder. That would be great for him. Very athletic. Find the answers. And understand each battle and understand your path back to that same spot where you start out in the open and make him chase you in. Will we see that? I don't know. It's going to be fun, though. It's going to be real fun. Today, when we put this up, this is... Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. This is the 27th. We might find one more fight on this card to talk about on the 28th. I don't know. Go back and check out my Holly Holm versus Cyborg one. You will find very few answers there as well. But I appreciate you letting me do my thing. Thanks, guys. Enjoy the hostilities, my friends.